Today's interview question is, how does Spring auto configuration work internally? Spring Boot examines the library available on your class path. Imagine that our project needs a JPA dependency. We added it, and now due to this we have JPA and persistent related classes on our application class path. Spring Boot now able to detect the relevant technology, and it will automatically consider the JPA related auto configuration. Similarly, if the database related classes are available, Spring Boot can consider the data source related configuration. The important word is consider. If the dependency is present, does not mean that Spring Boot will blindly create every possible bin. First, the boot discovers the relevant auto configuration candidate. Then the conditions determine whether those candidates are appropriate for the particular application. When the required condition matches, the configuration is applied and the required Spring beans are registered in the application context. This is where @conditional annotations plays vital role. Now the next question is, where does this process actually starts? The Spring Boot application usually start with @Spring Boot application. We often treat this annotation as a single, but it internally combines multiple responsibilities. But for this discussion, let's focus on @enable auto configuration. Spring Boot application consists of @enable auto configuration, which consists of configuration import selector. This is the first important internal connection to remember. Enable auto configuration does not itself contain every database, JPA, and other configuration. Instead, it activates the mechanism responsible for discovering and selecting auto configuration classes to import into the application context. Now, let us look at these annotations more closely. Focus on @import annotation. The important relationship is @enable auto configuration uses @import, and that import points to auto configuration import selector. That class name is worth remembering for an experience level Spring interview. When Spring processes the configuration classes, this selector participate in deciding which auto configuration classes should be imported as candidate. Notice the distinction. @enable auto configuration enables the feature. Auto configuration import selector helps to select the auto configuration candidates. Later, the conditional processing determines which configurations are actually applicable. So, if an interviewer asks what is behind @enable auto configuration, you can explain what we discussed. Now we know who participates in selecting candidates. Let's see what exactly the auto configuration import selector do. Auto configuration import selector is one of the central piece of this internal flow. At high level, its job is to determine the auto configuration classes that should be considered for import. It is a deferred import selector. You do not need to memorize every implementation. Let's see what are the responsibilities associated with @auto configuration import selector. First is candidate discovery. It needs to obtain the available auto configuration candidate. Second, exclusion. The Spring Boot allows auto configuration to be excluded. So explicitly excluded configuration should not remain in the final candidate set. Third is filtering. Spring Boot can reduce the set of candidates before proceeding. Ultimately, it supplies the configuration that should participate in the remaining configuration processing. This is intentionally a simplified representation, not line by line copy of a Spring Boot release. Look at the class definition first. The auto configuration import selector implements deferred import selector. Then notice the kind of operation represented here. Select import, get candidate configuration, get exclusion, and apply filtering. The method name get candidate configuration is particularly useful. At point of time, Spring Boot needs the list of classes. But where does the list come from? If you have worked with the older Spring Boot version, you may remember spring.factories under META-INF. In modern Spring Boot application, you will encounter AutoConfiguration.imports. In older Spring Boot version, auto configuration classes were registered through META-INF spring.factories. Inside this file, there is enable auto configuration entries associated with auto configuration class names. Modern Spring Boot uses a dedicated import file, which is auto configuration import. This file contains fully qualified auto-configuration class name, typically one per line. Let's see how spring.factories file look like. Spring.factory is not a Java source code. It is a metadata file under META-INF. It contains enable auto configuration entries followed by a fully qualified path. These are the auto configuration classes available for consideration. Being listed as a candidate does not mean every configuration become active. Now compare with the modern registration file. Instead of the older enable auto configuration key followed by a list, the modern registration uses auto configuration.imports and list auto configuration classes one per line. Again, the discovery only tells the Spring Boot which configuration exists as a candidate. It doesn't mean all of them should be applied. Imagine your application do not use JPA or any messaging technology. Here, Spring Boot need another decision layer. This is where the conditional annotations become extremely important. Let's try to understand at the rate conditional annotations with the help of an example. If the AWS SDK S3 dependency is present, then the S3 client is available and the condition can match. Remove the S3 dependency, the S3 client disappears from the class path. And this is the condition where at the rate conditional annotation on class is useful. Class path presence alone is not enough. The Spring Boot needs to know what the application has already configured. This is where at the rate conditional on bean, at the rate conditional on missing bean like annotations become important. The most important for understanding the back of behavior is at the rate conditional on missing bean. Imagine a Spring Boot is capable of providing a bean. If the application has not provided the bean, a missing bean condition can match. Spring Boot will supply its sensible default. But suppose we explicitly create our own bean, for example, a data source. Now the application provided data source exists. Since the application provided data source exists, at the rate conditional on missing bean condition no longer matches. Spring Boot do not fight for the configuration, it simply back off. Now consider application.properties file. Sometime auto configuration should apply only when a particular property is present or has a value. This is where at the rate conditional on property is useful. These are the some examples which we discussed earlier. Please pause the video and go through it. Let us try to connect the entire journey. Our application start with at the rate Spring Boot application that include the capability provided by at the rate enable auto configuration. At the rate enable auto configuration import selector. This selector participates in discovering and selecting auto configuration candidate. Spring Boot register auto configuration candidate using spring.factories or auto configuration import file based on the Spring Boot version you are using. Those discover classes are candidate. The configuration classes contain conditional configuration. Spring evaluates the condition based on classes on the class path, existing or missing bean, configuration properties or application type. If condition matches, the relevant configuration can apply and bean is registered. If it's not matched, it is skipped. When our application already provides its own configuration, conditions such as at the rate conditional on missing bean allows Spring Boot default configuration to back off. The most important thing to remember is that the Spring Boot auto configuration is not a magic. It is a structured decision process. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching Architect's Diary.